Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Good. I'm thankful. Thanksgiving coming up. Get to eat turkey, and my wife said she's making. Okay, over under. No, I'm not even going to ask you over under. I'm just going to ask you how many pies did my wife say she's making? Different types of pies.
Okay.
It's not like, oh, I'm making multiple pumpkin pies. How many different types of pies is my wife making this week? And
Well, we
then that
know
will let you know why I am thankful.
there's obviously pumpkin is one. We can just check that off the board. That's the RSTLNE of the pie making.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is a fall pie. Is that correct?
Yes, I did request apple, and apple is apparently in the mix. Yes,
Now,
there's two.
cherry is more of a winter spring pie. I don't eat. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't eat pie.
Mm.
Like it doesn't do anything. I mean, like I don't like pumpkin, apple, cherry pies. Rhubarb. You are now an Ohioan. Do you have rhubarb pie? I will say no because you probably don't know any better. I will say 5 pies.
5 pies is exactly correct. This
That's
is like the Friends where they had to guess how many categories of towels Monica had, and just had a complete shot in the dark. I think it was 11.
But no, 5 was my first number. That was like
5,
that's about the right number.
Yeah. You forgot pecan, which is pretty shameful.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like I said,
yeah.
I'm not a pie person. I'm not a sweet pastry. I'm more of a cake.
Yeah, and that's respectable. Not a Warrant fan. No. We are rolling in the timely references today.
Yeah, that's true. Tom, what is your favorite Bachman Turner Overdrive song?
Has to be Taking Care of Business, but there's only one specific part of it that I like.
I know what you're talking about. Tom, do you want to start the show? Should we start the show over? Or
well, we either need to get to the working overtime part or start talking about Ohio State football pretty darn quickly.
So yeah, you mentioned that you've got a bunch of pies in the oven. Our family of 87 are all getting together, coming from all over the country, different states. We're all going to get together in a little lodge, and then we're going to go meet community people and just try to bring a lot of Thanksgiving cheer to people. After we, like I said, we come from all over the country and we mingle for a few hours, and then we go out and see everybody.
The traditional Thanksgiving sneezing circle in your family. Yes, that's good. Yes.
No, we're going to be huddled at home like everybody else. No super spreader events going on here for once. So yeah, Tom, let's talk football. Today we talked to Ryan Day, head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, Kerry Coombs, defensive coordinator, Tuff Borland and Pete Warner as the linebackers, Chris Olave, receiver, Paris Johnson, offensive lineman, Josh Myers, offensive lineman. Did I forget a defender in there?
I don't think so. I think you got everyone.
Boom.
You said Jonathan Cooper, right? You said Kerry Combs?
Oh,
well, then you did not.
Cooper. No, dang it. We also talked to Coop today. And while we learned a ton of stuff, and while a ton of stuff was said, the thing that stuck out the most with both of us, as we were talking about before the show, is the situation at safety and Marcus Hooker. And after the game against Indiana, where Indiana threw for almost 500 yards, Ryan Day said said the issues with the passing game or with any kind of issues are it's either personnel or scheme or coaching. And he said today that it turns out it's all three. There's issues with all three. But on Saturday, he said he didn't foresee any changes. Mainly speaking of the personnel is how I took it. Today, however, we both came away with the thinking like they are looking. I'm not saying they're looking to change personnel, but they are looking to see if a change in personnel can happen, and that's through practice and getting guys different reps. But it sure feels like today Marcus Hooker's job is in greater jeopardy than it felt like after the game on Saturday when Ryan Day said, "I don't foresee any changes."
Well, and this was one of the first thing Day talked about, and he was the first person we talked to. And the quote was, they were looking at, quote, other combinations back there that will work better. So that at least suggests a cut in playing time, probably for Marcus Hooker, probably to me. But, they only played 5 guys. It was not like they rotated through 9 different defensive backs through that game against Indiana. it was just the five guys who are the five guys who are always out there. Seven Banks, Sean Wade, Marcus Hooker, Marcus Williamson, and Josh Proctor. That's it. Those are the five guys who played. So in order to have different combinations back there, either as we talked about before the show, I mean, you can get into this a little bit about, potentially flip-flopping Proctor and Hooker and putting Hooker closer to the line of scrimmage and having Proctor be that kind of deep safety, or, having someone else earn their way onto the field this week in practice, whether that's Lathan Ransom or Legend Cavazos or Ryan Watts or Tyreek Johnson or someone else. You've got the five guys. Okay, well, they're going to have at least five guys they can play, because you're going to be in a nickel situation at some point. And we can get into Pete Werner's quote on the fact that they anticipate that teams are going to look at what Indiana had success with and try and do the same things. And Pete Werner had a pretty spicy quote about that as far as Ohio State player quotes go. We can get into that a little later, but you're going to get tested in probably some of the same ways that get tested against Indiana. So they're going to have five guys they can play. So either Marcus Hooker is going to be in a different spot, or they're going to have to, bring someone into that circle of trust that was not in there last weekend.
And it's not like Josh Proctor graded out a champion, because he didn't. And there, he wasn't perfect either. And you mentioned the switch that I was talking with you about beforehand, where let's just move Marcus Hooker to Josh Proctor's role, which is part-time slot corner, part-time second deep safety, and then make Josh Proctor the full-time deep safety. And I only say that knowing, like, if Marcus Hooker is one of the only five guys in a circle of trust, maybe it would be better to have him closer to the line of scrimmage as opposed to the last line of defense, knowing how important the last line of defense is in this defense. And I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm saying it might. I don't even know. I'm not even saying it would be better. But at this point, we're talking about you have to do something, and clearly they're looking into doing something different this week. Ryan Day said that the point of this defense is it's designed to avoid big plays, and so when you see how many big plays are being given up, then things need to be fixed. And I think everybody realizes the issue is, does this defense become better if you put anybody in there besides Marcus Hooker? I think that's a bit extreme, but let's see what Ronnie Hickman does. Let's see what Bryson Shaw does. Let's see what Lathan Ransom, like, how much worse or how bad is it in practice? And I think that's what they're going to spend some time on this week. And also the overwhelming message that everybody kept saying is the problems are fixable. And do you fix that by putting somebody new in, or do you fix that by Marcus Hooker not jumping on routes or going up and covering stuff that he doesn't need to cover when he is the last line of defense? And that was something else that was said. It's like Kerry Coombs said, you don't want to be in this one high safety. You have to be the guy behind everybody, and you can't jump up on a crossing route that has other people involved, and then you've left your corner Seven Banks in no man's land. But Combs also said that Seven Banks needs to cover that better. But I don't know who's going to be back there, obviously, but it's not going to surprise me, or it's not going to shock me now to see somebody else getting that start. Would you be, Tom? And I'll let you go. But first, would you be more surprised if Hooker is starting or isn't starting on Saturday?
I would be more surprised if he is, just because I don't think Illinois. Well, I was going to say I don't think Illinois is going to come out in like a 4 wide, personnel. You come out in like 10 personnel or something, where they would absolutely be forced to play a nickel. So I guess if they're not coming out in a nickel, I would be more surprised if he's not playing. I guess I don't know. I'm talking myself into both of these answers simultaneously at the same time. So simultaneously and at the same time, so you can tell
that's how you can never be wrong.
Really happening. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You might say it's 50-50. There are those who have made a living on being 50-50. Yeah, it's I think that it's much more likely that he's not a starter than I would have said 3 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I really think that's super likely. Just based on the fact that I don't think there are other people that they really truly trust. And, Kerry Coombs talked a little bit about the fact that they're so happy with how the linebackers are playing that they don't really want to take those linebackers off the field and get out of that base defense, unless they have to. And, that was something I've talked to Ross Fulton about that on the morning scoop on Tuesday morning, where they stay in that base defense and then you end up with linebackers out covering wide receivers, and they trust the linebackers more, but also you're maybe putting linebackers in positions where, Pete Werner's a fantastic athlete. I don't know that they really want Pete Werner out there covering someone like way split out wide to the field side of the field. That's not a great position to be in, but there really kind of aren't great solutions right now. Like there's no like one clean, easy solution right now for Ohio State that's like, aha, well, if they just do this one simple thing, like the one weird trick that, the old internet ad, like one weird trick to fix the Ohio State pass defense. Like, I don't know that there is one weird trick. I think it could get solved by Marcus Hooker being a little bit more fundamentally sound in what he's doing back there and trusting himself and trusting his teammates and not trying to do too much and just sort of playing his role. It could get solved by moving people around and putting Josh Proctor in that spot and Marcus Hooker somewhere else. But I don't know that there's a guaranteed. And I don't think, as of the time we talked to everyone, which was before practice on Tuesday, I don't think they know what the solution is going to be. I think they're looking at a bunch of things right now, and they're going to see how practice goes, see how things work this week, see how guys look, and then they'll sort of have it figured out by Saturday.
And they'll have basically 3 practices to figure this out: Tuesday, Wednesday. Well, maybe I don't even know if they're going to practice Thursday. Maybe. I mean,
I would assume they're going to practice Thursday because it basically sounds like no one's going anywhere. So, and with as much as they've tried to get everything, they didn't have a practice on Monday. Day didn't talk about a Monday practice, so I would assume you're going to have kind of a normal week. And they talked about basically keeping guys. Guys are not going home this week. They're not going to see their families, so you're going to have a nice Thanksgiving dinner at the Woody Hayes and. Might as well have practice, might as well stay in your normal weekly routine. I mean, that's no one specifically asked, but that was certainly my assumption.
Yeah. And so I believe they had practice Sunday and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that's where you've got to find a new starter. You're talking about the linebackers and how they don't want to go into that nickel. And I wonder how much of it is we really like the linebackers, which they do, but it's also how much they don't like the nickel package, which, I think there's some truth to that. And then you see Taraja Mitchell getting matched up one-on-one with David Ellis, who is kind of like a Demario McCall. So basically think about, Taraja Mitchell or Pete Werner being matched up out wide with the Demario McCall, and that's not a favorable matchup, but that's what's going to happen when you've got 3 linebackers out there and the running back moves out wide into the slot. And thought it was interesting talking to Pete Werner, and he said when he's out there, when he moves and motions out there, his mentality is the ball is coming to me, because they know it's a matchup that they feel they can win. And so you got to narrow your hips and just prepare for the ball. And then Taraja Mitchell, I guess he narrowed his hips and dropped back into his zone and let the guy go behind him. And was that some miscommunication? And that's another issue, Tom. It's one thing if a player like Marcus Hooker is just jumping on routes he shouldn't. It's another if that is the guy getting everybody where they're supposed to be. So that's the guy that is also supposed to know where to go. And if he's not doing his job in terms of being where he's supposed to be, now it's a double-edged sword of seppuku, basically, where not only are you jumping things you shouldn't, but you're also not where you're supposed to be just in general. And I don't know if that's all going on with him. But man, you think what this defense would be with just Jordan Fuller being solid, and because they gave up 4 plays of over 50 yards against Indiana. The 2018 defense, I forget, I think they gave up 4 all year, maybe. Last year's defense gave up 1. And so they outdid that in one game with just a bunch of broken coverages. And it wasn't broken tackles, just broken coverages.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that maybe makes it easier to fix is just if it is just mental errors, just guys saying, okay, when in doubt, be the deep guy. Like that's your job as a deep safety. I mean, Kerry Coombs said in a single high defense, you'd like to have that guy deeper. And, that was in reference to the Seven Banks play that you mentioned earlier, where a guy I think ran a post on Seven Banks, and Marcus Hooker saw someone with linebackers in coverage underneath and tried to jump that route, and then all of a sudden he's going towards the line of scrimmage, the ball's going over his head, and there's no one back there to help Seven Banks. So when the receiver gets one step ahead of Seven Banks, it's a touchdown. So that's fixable as long as you can get it through to Marcus Hooker. Like, hey, when we say you're the deep safety, we mean you're the deep safety. And this is a little bit more complicated than just you're basically playing a prevent every single snap like that, because then that makes you predictable, and you don't want to do that either. But you have to not make the same mistake, because I mean, as you said earlier, not allowing big plays is literally the main focus, the major number one focus of this defense. So if your whole defense is geared around, we don't want to allow big plays, and then you're giving up as many big plays in one afternoon as you did in the entire 2018 season, which was not exactly a banner season for the Ohio State defense, that's a problem. Like, that is a major, major, major issue that needs immediate solving. And again, like I said, I'm not 100% sure that they really, truly know what they're going to do to solve it. But I think they know, well, there's 3 different options right now, or 4 different options, or however many different choices they have. We're going to try these until we find one that works. And this is not an unsolvable problem. If you can get Marcus Hooker to stay deep, that maybe helps. If you want to do it as a personnel switch and have Josh Proctor be the guy who's back there, because I think Josh Proctor might be better at being able to stay disciplined and make the right choices, then that's fine too. Like, whatever it is, that's fine. They're going to spend the next couple of days really working to make sure that whatever that issue is, it is not an issue again this Saturday.
Yeah, the fortunate thing is the next 2 offenses they play don't throw the ball well, although Michigan State surely threw the ball well against Michigan. We can agree on that. But if you're going to throw somebody out there, somebody new, these would be the next 2 weeks to do that against Illinois and Michigan State, where the passing game it's forgivable. I maybe compare it to like coach pitch, type of stuff, where it's as controlled an environment as you can get in an uncontrolled environment. And it's not Michael Penix, it's not Justin Fields putting the ball in certain places. It's Brandon Peters, it's Isaiah Williams, it's whatever freshman took over for Rocky Lombardi. These aren't Murderers Row. These are, I don't know, Skid Row. It's another timely reference. But if you're going to allow players to fail, and Ryan Day said that, they're hesitant to put in backups, and we go off what we see in practice in terms of who plays. But if playing in games and making mistakes is the best teacher, these are 2 games where you can put those guys in, let them make mistakes, and let them become better for it. Because I'll tell you right now, Tom, Cade McNamara is going to tear these guys up.
Maybe we'll see. Yeah. And this is the next 2 weeks are 2 weeks where I don't think I could see anything that convinces me that Ohio State absolutely has the defensive, especially the pass defense issues fixed. But I could see stuff that absolutely convinces me that they don't have the pass defense fixed. If Brandon Peters throws for 350, 400 yards on them on Saturday, that will be a nope, try again. And if you have that, another 300 something yards out of Rocky Lombardi in 2 weeks, like, again, like, nope, try again. If they hold Illinois to 120 passing yards, well, yeah, I mean, Ohio State's defense has far, far, far better players than Illinois. You're probably getting to the point of the season where, a Saturday afternoon in Champaign, in the wind tunnel in Champaign, has never exactly been a great place to throw the football. And then, Michigan up in East Lansing, Michigan, the first weekend in December, like, again, those are not exactly Rose Bowl or Sugar Bowl kind of conditions for passing. And those are not Rose Bowl or Sugar Bowl level quarterbacks that you're facing or wide receivers that you're facing. So this is a very training wheels couple of weeks. Like, if you're going to make a switch, this would be a great time to do it and just sort of let, experience is the ultimate teacher. And if you're going to make a switch, whether it's schematic or personnel, like, this is the time to do it. We've had people asking us on the board, who else can they play? And it's like, I don't know. My assumption is because they're not playing other guys that they don't feel like they have anyone. I mean, that's what that means. We have not gotten to watch practice, so we don't know. Like, we have seen what, half an hour of practice since the first practice of spring ball. So, I don't have real strong opinions on the second and third string safeties, and that's, possibly that's on me. But, the fact that this is again a look at what I do, not what I say, and what they're doing right now is not playing those guys, which tells me that whatever they're seeing in practice, it is not, not suggestive that these guys are ready to go. Now, maybe Legend Cavazos is close enough to ready to go after getting back, finally being back and healthy. Maybe he's close enough to ready to go that you can slide him into, one of that corner rotation or something. Maybe he can be in that slot corner spot. Maybe, but ditto for Ryan Watts. Like, maybe he can get in there somewhere. Ronnie Hickman. I mean, we didn't see Ronnie Hickman last year. He missed the whole year with a knee injury. Court Williams was someone who they, had talked about real highly as someone who could be a real impact player. Well, now he's out for the year, so he's out of the picture. Bryson Shaw, we really didn't see last year. He had one big hit in a game, I think it was the Rutgers game, and it was like, oh, there's Bryson Shaw, and then he didn't play a snap against Indiana on defense. I mean, this is all stuff that's suggestive that they don't feel like there is a real quick, easy solution here.
Well, even going back to Lathan Ransom, when he played Against Nebraska, and then I asked Day or Coombs about it on Tuesday, and they were like, that was more about basically he was practicing in that spot that week. And so he was just the next guy up, and it could be somebody else the next week. And clearly it hasn't been him since. And there's just these moving parts. Now, Tom, going back to that 30 minutes of spring practice we saw, I will remind you of a safety who jumped a route in the slot for an interception.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember who that was? And can you tell our listeners who that was?
I believe that was Marcus Hooker. I believe we came right. Am I right?
Yep. You're correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is we watched about half an hour inside Ohio Stadium sometime in like September, right? Early October, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that, we watched, an hour or something of that. I might have watched that whole first practice this spring.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But I mean, we came away with the impression that Jackson Smith and Jigba is the real deal.
We were right.
Mm-hmm. That check mark for us. And, Marcus Hooker was like, oh, he had an interception. They played Bryson Shaw in the slot a little bit that day. I mean, but that's really functionally the last time we've got to see any of these guys outside of the same stuff you have seen on TV. We get to watch them a little bit during warmups, but how you can't necessarily glean a lot during warmups. So there's just not a lot of information for us to work off of right now. And the information that the coaches have obviously is substantially more than that. And so you fall back on what are they doing? Don't worry about what they're saying. What are they doing? And what they're doing is suggestive to me that there is not an easy, obvious, swap in A for B kind of solution right now.
My point being that he had that interception like in the slot area, so maybe make him the slot guy and have Josh Proctor be the deep guy. That's what I was saying based on that one play, and maybe I'm sure there's been other plays since. Who's to say? The 2018 defense keeps coming up, and one of the things that Ryan Day shot down pretty quickly, he was like, and I'll paraphrase here. He said, well, that defense also couldn't stop the run. So let's keep that in mind. And whereas the defense right now, the 2020 defense is only giving up big passing plays. The running game has been shut down. So he's like, it's not a comparison at all, even though as we're watching it, you're getting 2018 vibes, but he is kind of correct. Well, he is correct in that it's not, oh, there goes Ty Johnson for 86 yards, or mainly because they didn't play Maryland and mainly because Ty Johnson is in the NFL. But there's no 93-yarder from TCU, mixed in there. And a lot of those big plays that they gave up in 2018 were on the ground, as evidenced by the fact that there was, like I said, maybe only apparently like 4 50-yarders through the air, which you're like, boy, that sure seems low for that 2018 defense. But it's because they didn't need 50-yarders through the air because they just went 70 on the ground. And so the defense here, at least the running defense is working. There's just some things to fix in the passing game. And we've heard that for years, though. Well, yeah, it's just a couple things we just need to clean up. And we can do that. I believe we can do that. But when you're saying it week after week, and not that has happened yet, because we see a half of really good defense and then a half of bad defense, and you're like, well, how much do you weigh each half? But I think these next couple of weeks, if they are giving up passing yards against bad quarterbacks, now you get very, very concerned, because eventually you're going to meet good quarterbacks from teams that can run the ball, and then you're just going to get absolutely obliterated. So these 2 weeks, and actually you could throw Michigan in there as well, and even the Northwestern game, because really, if Peyton Ramsey is the best quarterback you're going to face, you should be able to fail a little bit in the back end and still overcome everything. But they need to use these 4 games to figure that safety position out. And we've spent almost a half hour talking about it. And I don't even know if we're spending enough time talking about it.
Well, it's a big deal. And it's like we came into the year with, some concerns about the defensive backfield. We came into the year with some concerns about the interior defensive line. The interior defensive line has okay, I think you can cross that one off the concern list at this point. The defensive line has been really good. They have not had a ton of sacks, but they've gotten really good pressure. I mean, go through all the guys who graded as champions. Go through, that's how the Ohio State coaching staff is graded. And go through, I think Pro Football Focus had Tyreek Smith and Jonathan Cooper among their highest pressure rates of
Tommy Togiai number 1.
Tommy Togiai number 1. Yeah, I mean, they're getting close. They're just not quite getting there. But you're impacting the quarterback anyway. The linebackers have been fantastic this year. For as much as you look at the 2018 team and how much of the issues there were related to the linebackers, and it's the same guys. It's the same guys, but there's probably, arguably, possibly been a positional coach upgrade since then, and they've probably, arguably, possibly got more experience than they had back then. So, I mean, the linebackers have gone from the weakness of that team to the strength. And if you've got a good defensive line and a good linebacker unit, you're going to be hard to run the ball on. You have good linebackers who have, 99 awareness in the EA game, if they had an EA game right now. These guys have seen it all. They don't get fooled. They don't get out of position. They're not, they don't have bad run fits. They're in the right spot all the time. That keeps you from giving up a lot of those 80-yard runs that they were giving up against Oregon State and TCU and all those teams in 2018. It's right now the concern is the defensive backfield. That's it. Now that is written in Sharpie, big bold Sharpie, and circled and underlined, and there's a bunch of stars and exclamation points outside of that circle. Hey, this needs immediate action, needs to be immediately addressed. They have done a pretty good job of addressing most of the other concerns. The defensive line is no longer a concern. The offensive line did a pretty darn good job. I think all 5 guys graded out as champions last week, and that was another thing that was viewed as a major concern going into that week. They have done a pretty good job of addressing these concerns. If you get this one straightened out, okay, you should feel pretty decent, because there's no one right now that has all answers and no questions. There's no one in the country that has, it just looks like an absolute juggernaut. Everyone has oh, they're really good in these 4 spots, but there's there's 2 things that are not fantastic. That's just everyone this year. And if you can go from this is a total disaster to like, yeah, this is okay, but it's not really up to the normal standard. Like you might be able to live with that this year.
Yeah, the entire offensive line graded out as champions. Defensively, Haskell Garrett, Tommy Togiai, all 4 defensive ends who played. Javante Jean-Baptiste wasn't out there from what I saw, but all of the defensive ends graded out as champions, linebackers as well. And Sean Wade also graded out a champion. I know he gets a lot of grief. People, Tom, I got into an argument on Twitter.
The best use of everyone's time. Yes, go on.
Not even an argument. Just I saw, because I follow a lot of people. I interact. I have nothing better to do. I'm quarantined. But I saw, somebody saying I'm tired of everybody giving credit to the other guy when Sean Wade gives up a catch, and it's time for him to start producing. And I responded, he had a pick 6.
Yes, but other than the time he scored a touchdown as a defensive player, yes, what else did he do?
And then, so yes, he gave up a touchdown, and my next response was like, anytime a cornerback scores as many touchdowns as they give up, anytime they're a 0 in terms of points given, points scored, you're going to take that. And the guy is getting grief as he learns to play a position that he's really not been allowed to play. I mean, even in 2018, when he was healthy, he was slot corner, he was deep safety, he was strong safety, as they tried to figure out Greg Schiano moving all of these chess pieces. And you're like, Greg, it's a checkerboard. What are you doing?
Greg, stop chewing on the rook. Stop it.
No.
And now Greg Schiano's chess piece set is all knights. Get it? Because
and you know why? They're made of wood, and you know why? Because he kept chopping.
Oh, wait. So does that mean he's swinging an axe at his players? That metaphor just got real dark real quick.
Yeah, well, I mean, have you ever been to New Jersey? Yes, you have.
I have.
From there.
It's true. There you go.
You are practically a Schiano.
You take that back. It's the worst thing anyone's ever said to me.
So Ryan Day, people are like, can you play this scheme? Are you going to change schemes? I think what continues to be reaffirmed is Ryan Day loves the one high, and he said, this is what we do. This is our scheme. This scheme works. The other thing to remember is Ryan Day is a very good quarterback thinker, offensive thinker, and he's going to put out he wants the kind of defense that makes offense hardest. And so clearly this is the defense that he thinks that is. And so, who are we to disagree with him? Of course, you have to recruit to it, which is also what he says they have done with the 4 down linemen. And, some teams like the 3-4, but they want to get pressure from the 4 down linemen. Linebackers do what they do. And then you cover with the secondary, and you you blitz here and there, but you don't want to necessarily make risks. And so while we may see changes with personnel, like what they've been doing on defense, I expect to continue. And because that's what Ryan Day wants, but also that's the personnel in terms of everywhere else, except for that one high guy that needs to be figured out. And I guess, even though, and I credit us, you and me, for focusing on how important this position was going to be for this entire defense, finding somebody to replace Jordan Fuller. And whenever people, like even on today's Zoom call, people talking about how, I think people underrated how important Jordan Fuller was to this defense. And I'm thinking, I just want to interrupt, like, excuse me, Ryan, if knowing you listen to Buckeye Weekly, you would know that we never underestimated or underrated Jordan Fuller's importance to this defense, and the listeners know that. And so when you hear other people say, gosh, maybe people didn't appreciate him as much, then that should be a red flag to the listeners that people saying that aren't as intelligent, Tom, football-wise. Not like actual intelligence, but they're not as intelligent as you and me, football-wise.
I took that another way. I took that as, wow, that was very clever to pretend when you listen to our show you didn't hear that, because that you don't want to admit, listen to all these other shows. Like, no, you would never want to say that. So, that's fair. I understand. I get it. Very clever, little Machiavellian. Yeah, Alex Gleitman actually put together a really interesting piece on the Ask the Insiders board just talking about, how they got to this spot. Because, I mean, you talked about the fact they recruit to that, the rushing four. They recruit the defensive line so that they have the players to rush for and they have the personnel to do that. You have to recruit to have the defensive backs to be able to run the one high system. Like you have to fit your personnel to your scheme, and you can fit your personnel to your scheme by recruiting those guys. But so how have they gotten themselves into a spot where it doesn't seem like they have the personnel to do it? I mean, Jeff Okudah, 2017 recruiting class, Jeff Okudah and Kendall Sheffield off to the NFL. John Wade's still there. He's moving from the slot to the outside. Amir Reep dismissed from the team. Marcus Williamson, this is still his first year starting. Not fantastic. I mean, not having a great year so far. Isaiah Pryor just didn't work at safety, transferred to Notre Dame. Brendan White didn't really work out at safety, and the one high transferred to Rutgers. 2018 class, Tyreek Johnson has really not gotten on the field yet. Seven Banks, he's doing okay this year, but he's still kind of a work in progress. Cam Brown out for the year with an injury. Josh Proctor, he's there. He's hasn't gotten that starting job yet, but he's doing a pretty good job. Marcus Hooker. So I mean, this is that 2018 class. You've got 4 of the 5 guys have been on the field this year. Cam Brown is out with an injury. Tyreek Johnson is not playing. The other 3 guys are still like 3 of the 5 guys you're out there. 2019, Ronnie Hickman. I mean, this is his first year. He missed all of last year with an injury. Bryson Shaw. I mean, he is, in that mix. He's one of those people you saw him a little bit against Rutgers, but he's not out there yet. Jordan Battle flipped real late to Alabama. That one just, you put Jordan Battle on the team. Jordan Battle had a pick 6 for Alabama last weekend against Kentucky. You think they might like to have Jordan Battle at the back of this defense this year? Like, that might help. And they missed on, they didn't have any other corners. So that's a problem. And then 2020 legend Cavazos had an injury, just got back to practice last week, but you're way behind then. Brian Watts has also been a little dinged up, and again, a true freshman. That's tough to get on the field. Lathan Ransom, we mentioned, has been out there again, true freshman. Court Williams out for the season. He was someone that they had really talked up. It seemed like of all those true freshmen, might be the one who gets on the field, and he's out with an injury. Cam Martinez now finally making the transition to defense, and then Clark Phelps flipped to Utah, and it's like, okay, that's it. Like you have all of these guys, and it's like, well, how could you possibly, with all of those guys, not have more than 5 people that you can trust? And the answer is some of them left early for the NFL. How different would this team look if Jeff Okudah was still on the team? Like pretty darn good. That would be a big help. And maybe if Isaiah Pryor was still here, maybe he'd be the safety right now. He's starting at safety for Notre Dame. So but he transferred out. Just between the guys leaving for the NFL, the guys transferring, the guys getting hurt, and the guys who just aren't quite ready yet, because you're not necessarily going to be ready your first or second year. Like there's not that many guys who are like clearly busts on that list. There's just guys who are not quite there yet. And, that's what happens when you have a couple guys get kicked off the team. You have a couple guys who are, who are late flips where you had, you thought you had your corner in the 2019 class. You thought you had your slot corner in the 2020 class. And well, they both flipped. And sometimes that happens and it puts you in a bad spot. And then, if you lose 1 or 2 of those, it's like, it's not a big deal. When all of that stuff happens all at once, it kind of snowballs, and then you end up in the spot they're in right now.
And I've also seen people asking, well, can you move? Are there any receivers who can move over? And this is a thin receiver group anyway, and you're not going to move any of those freshmen. The upperclassmen, Jalen Harris has been out. Not that you can flip a 6'5" receiver into any kind of defensive back. Elijah Gardner, I haven't seen hide nor hair of. And Cameron Babb has knee issues, and like you're worried about. You're just trying to get him back into the flow of being on offense. So there's going to be no receivers moving. Part of that, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, is that they are recruiting like actual wide receivers now instead of Paris Campbell. Where if this was 2015 and there were struggles, maybe you take Paris Campbell, who has not really produced yet as a receiver and as a redshirt freshman, and you put him on defense. And this was a guy that Kerry Coombs kept saying, I will make you a first round corner if you just come over and play defense. When you're recruiting like those kind of guys, athletes, and trying to make them, then maybe you switch them over. Or when you're really completely desperate, you have C. Grant move to corner because you have literally no other corners who are healthy or good. And the recruiting has been too good for that to be the case now. And they've got guys, but if it's like you're not going to move a receiver and have them move to the head of the class of all of these guys that aren't ready to play either. You know, you can only like move a guy and last week he was starting at receiver. He played receiver last week. Now he's at safety. That's because your program is bad. Maryland does that. Ohio State doesn't do that because there are 5 guys that they have to move past who aren't yet ready. And so when that happens, it's like Ohio State, I don't want to say they're in desperation mode. When that happens, that's because teams are in desperation mode. Or there's no Chris Gamble here. All right. So maybe that has clouded everybody's mind. And sure, you know what, Tom? And I don't want to dismiss the suggestions, but let's put Chris Gamble or Chris Olave. Let's let him play corner now too. Now he's playing, 65 snaps on offense, and you don't want to work him too hard. Say 40 snaps on defense, but that's not going to happen. You're not going to move anybody, so you just have to got to dance with the guys that brung you, or that you've brung, basically, to use proper English.
To use some kind of English. C. Grant. But you mentioned C. Grant. Like, yes, you can move C. Grant to corner, and you could do that. Do you remember what the 2001 Ohio State team looked like when they were doing that? Like, not great. They were not in position to make the college football playoff if a college football playoff had existed at that point. And yes, it would be wonderful to have a Chris Gamble on the team. It would be wonderful to have a Chris Gamble on the team every year. How many Chris Gambles would you say they've had since Chris Gamble left? I would say the answer is probably 0. Like, even Ohio State, which recruits like the most freakish athletes in the world, probably has not had a Chris Gamble level freak athlete who just was so natural, so fluid, so good, and just had the ability to just play 120 snaps if he needed to against Illinois. Like,
who else has? Nobody. Like, how many?
Literally no one. Yeah, literally no one. I mean, you go through and it's like, well, that one year they moved Boren from fullback to linebacker. Like, okay, yeah, that's okay. I mean, that goes a little bit to something that I think it was Kerry Coombs said today, where you can get away with throwing some inexperienced guys in the middle of the defensive line, because if they make a mistake and they have a bad run fit, they go to the wrong gap, you give up a first down. If you're putting a corner out there who doesn't know what he's doing, that mistake is 6 points. Like, the amount of risk that you have by putting someone out there who's not really ready at corner or safety, like, that's where you have touchdown mistakes as opposed to first down mistakes. So they just don't have that margin for error right now. And unfortunately, this is a spot where they don't have a real good, clean solution, and they're going to have to kind of figure it out this week.
One of the last things Ryan Day said that is, I guess, just truer words never being said about the state of society right now when talking about like social media backlash of whichever players are getting it playing at Ohio State, that he's like, he had to tell his players, like, yeah, there may be like 200 people ripping you on social media, but there are 10 million Buckeye fans out there who aren't sending you messages, who love you and who are fans, and just reiterating to these players while they are away from their families, while they are doing nothing socially other than going from the Woody to their apartment and seeing nobody, and then just looking at their phones and seeing messages from Buckeye fans saying, boy, you sure do suck. And it's like, now is not the right time for that. Like, when everybody right now is feeling a little bit like just closed in and maybe a little claustrophobic, it's now you look at your phone, your one respite where now you can see what's going on in the outside world. It's like, oh, you suck. I'm like, well, thank you. And Day's quote was, kind of like the Mike Gundy, come after me, I'm 40, I'm a man. He's like, I feel like I could take it. So I just worry about my kids and my wife. It's the same thing for these guys. And I think their parents hurt so much for them. That's part of the gig here. And it's just something you have to work through and have a plan for and have a good support system. And that's why, he's addressing it with them. That's why they have two mental health professionals with the team. And it's just, can we not just at players and project our own frustrations of our own life onto them, at least during a pandemic? Knock yourself out when we're all free to go to the mall and can go hang out with friends and go to the bar and go get hammered. Not during a pandemic when we're just, going from, like Josh Myers, we talked to him early in the week. He's like, I have not been in a grocery store since this whole thing. The only places I've been are literally home and the Woody. Those are the only two buildings I have been in. So yes, let's send messages ripping on players who have abandoned their families by choice and sacrificed everything that, we've all taken for granted. And then their families have as well. And their families then get cut off from their sons, can't even watch them play home games, and then suffer right along with it and get to see those same messages. Tom, please stop adding the players. You specifically.
Yeah. Counterpoint. But what if I'm mad?
Fair point. No, let's move on. You're right. No, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think this should go without saying, but yes, you should not do that. You should not add the players. You should consider strongly, like when you say something online and you talk about someone by their name, like think about the fact that they may see that. And would you say that to a person's face? Probably you would not. And so you should strongly consider not doing that online, because what are you accomplishing by doing that online? Probably not that much. And there's a certain stupid subcurrent of the internet, especially Twitter, which cannot wait to tell you you're wrong, even when they're wrong. I get this a lot when I write the most recent Buckeyes from a certain state, and it's like, well, also, this guy was from California. Like, read the article title again. Is it the most recent Buckeyes? So if there's someone more recent, then perhaps the fact that someone was there from there 30 years ago is not relevant information. Consider that. I also had that this week. I'm going to search through my timeline real quick. I had a tweet about Northwestern this week that was like, it seemed pretty uncontroversial when I sent it out, and immediately had like 30 people in my mentions like telling me why I was stupid for thinking this. And it was like, did you actually read it? Did you pay attention to the thing that I just did? Let's see. I'm scrolling back through all the tweets during the Michigan game. This may take a while.
Well, while you're doing that, I can also relay a tweet that I had sent back to me after I tweeted something out, and the response was, "Who cares?" And it's like, well, tweeting about who cares shows that you care. So clearly, you care by caring enough to spend time tweeting at me, but also you follow me.
Who cares what you think, though? Yeah, here's the tweet, the offending tweet. Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game is not great news for Ohio State. It's not an exciting name that will earn a lot of credit, and they're the type of team that will drag OSU down into a lower scoring game where style points are few and far between. There were 33 replies, all of which were basically, you stupid, dumb idiot. Why would style points matter? Ohio State just needs to win and they get in. So I responded a couple minutes later, like it was like 5 minutes later, and I looked and I was like, why do I have like 17 notifications on Twitter already? Yes, hello everyone in the replies. There is broad consensus there is likely a big gap between the top 3 teams and the 4th this year. Let's put on our thinking caps and try to puzzle out why style points could matter in the playoff, even for an unbeaten OSU. Like, take 2 seconds to think before you just tweet this dumb, stupid idiot. What's wrong with you? And the number of people who cannot let you tell you that you're stupid, who also are egg avatars with 5 followers, like, there's a correlation here. I wonder what that could mean. Let us once again put on our thinking caps and think about what that could mean. What do you think, Tony?
You think the Russians are out to get you?
Well, I always think that.
Yeah, I know, Tom. It's depressing. What are we going to do? Not be on Twitter? No.
the two best years of my life were the 2 years when I got off of Twitter, and then right before I started writing in, I was like, I have to get back on Twitter to promote content. So here I am. Everything is terrible.
You're so happy.
Just want to just create a script that just is okay, chief, and just reply that to everyone who replies to a stupid tweet. Just good, sure.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, just create your own bot to deal with the other bots. Tom, I don't know what else we need to talk about. We haven't even gotten to like Kerry Coombs and the players. Coombs did take a lot of basically all of the blame. Like as a coach, whenever one of your players makes a mistake, it's because you didn't coach them well enough. And it's like, well, okay, maybe the player is bad, and that's not as we've seen Urban Meyer blow up, like some of his comments recently, some of the videos. It's like the players aren't bad; it's the coaching. Just in general, like you can't throw your players under the bus, and you're seeing that attitude here with Kerry Coombs, where it's like, yeah, it's my job to fix it. It's my job to eliminate the big plays, and clearly that's what they're going to try to do this week with more personnel than scheme changes, as what we are assuming. Unless Marcus Hooker can hold off the competition, which I guess we should address. That's also a possibility, and maybe now we are viewing this as an open job, and if he wins it, that's great. But also, don't forget to play well during the game as well. Maybe
seems important. Yes, and again, like I don't know what I could see this weekend that would make me think, aha, they definitely have this fixed. Because I don't think this is going to be, late November in Champaign is not great throwing the ball weather. I have not looked at the forecast, but I assume that it is going to be 25-mile-an-hour winds, as it always is in Champaign. And, I think it's 40-something degrees. And, that's just, so if Illinois can't move the ball through the air on Ohio State, it doesn't necessarily convince me that they've solved the problem, but if I see something different, or you can see some things that are, even if it doesn't show up on the stat sheet, if you have someone back there deep, if they're incomplete passes and there's no one back there deep, that tells me something different than if there is someone back there deep. And, you don't have a guy who's open running free, even if Brandon Peters can't hit him. Like, I mean, you can take some things away from this, but, this is just, I really do wonder what they're going to do, because there was a really interesting contrast to me today between the way they talked about Justin Fields and the way they talked about the passing defense, because neither of them had a particularly great game on Saturday. And Justin Fields, the response on Justin Fields, and I'm sure you can all figure out why, but the response on Justin Fields was very much like, yeah, it's fine. He had a bad day. He had made a couple bad choices. No one, after a 3 interception game, no one is thinking about replacing Justin Fields at quarterback. The fact that there's just, they're looking at a bunch of different stuff as far as the defense goes, that tells me that they think, there really is potentially a problem there, and they need to find some way to solve it. And I don't think they know yet what that way is.
And I know everybody keeps pointing to Brendan White, and sometimes a guy just isn't a practice player, and he's a gamer, and so you just got to find out. I will remind people that Brendan White, so he came on for the Nebraska game, then he started against Michigan State, which was terrible. Started against Maryland. Maryland scored 51 points against Ohio State. Then he started against Michigan. Michigan scored 39 points against Ohio State. Northwestern's offense scored 24. Washington's offense scored 23. Like in those final 4 games, the Ohio State defense with Brendan White in it was giving up 34 points a game and still giving up big plays. So it's not like he was this cure-all. And yes, he was the Rose Bowl MVP, and that's great. But I saw somebody mention, kind of alluding to this on the Ask the Insiders board, where how often are the best practicers also the best gamers, or how often isn't that the case? And I said less than 1%, because you got to figure the best practicers are also the best gamers. I mean, nobody doubts. You can think of all of the examples where the guy was just a gamer, and you put him in there like Brendan White. but you're forgetting all of the examples like Antoine Winfield, who was the best practicer and the best gamer. Like, why you're not going to replace him? You're not going to replace Jeff Okuda. You're not going to replace Thayer Munford. These are all the best practicers who are also the best players, and that adds up to the 99% of the players who earn the job and shouldn't be replaced, or that practice and play well. And people forget about the times the coaches get it right. That adds up all to all of the credit that a coach builds up, and then the 1% is where we like to, me, fans, are able to point and say, that's they're not always right because they got Brendan White wrong. And it's like, well, but they still got everybody else right.
Right. And even if they got Brendan White sort of wrong, they didn't get Brendan White totally wrong, because Brendan White's at Rutgers now and not at Ohio State now. So, I mean, there's wrong and then there's wrong. And you're seeing that a little bit at Michigan right now with the quarterback position. And it's like every time Cade McNamara comes into the game, it's like, what was the decision to start Joe Milton based on? Because based on what we're seeing, it seems like Cade McNamara is moving the ball significantly better than Joe Milton when he's in the game. Now, is that sustainable, or is that a function of a team that came in with a game plan aimed at stopping Joe Milton, and then Joe Milton, Cade McNamara is doing different things and has a different skill set, and he's maybe a more accurate passer but not as strong an arm, and on and on and on. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into it, and if Cade McNamara is the starter for Michigan this week, okay, let's see what that looks like when they're playing Penn State this week. And, it is not out of the realm of possibility that Cade McNamara goes 10 for 24 for 130 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. Like, that's a possibility this weekend. If he lights Penn State on fire, like, okay, then yes, you probably made the wrong decision then. But, I mean, you don't always want to defer to authority on this kind of stuff, but the coaching staffs are working with a lot more information than you are, or we are at this point. And, the idea that someone is just, well, they're just a game player and they aren't a practice player, but when the lights come on, like, that's probably a focus issue. And when you're talking about someone with a focus issue, it's like, okay, well, at what point during the game will they get bored? And then they're back to being what they are during practice. It is that, let's cite a recent example. Let's say you're up 35-7 in the third quarter. Like, if you're someone who really needs the adrenaline of the game and the close game and everything's on the line, will you still be up when you're ready to go and playing as hard as you can and making good plays when it's 35-7 and the game's kind of in hand? Like, maybe. Football is so much about trust, and who can the coaches trust? And we talked about the circle of trust earlier, and that's kind of an air quotes thing with with Ohio State. They don't really have a circle of trust where it's like something you've earned your way into and you have a patch on your jersey and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, who can the coaches trust you to not do something stupid while you're in the game? And it's hard to get in there, and once you're in, you're in. But that's not the easiest thing in the world to get into.
As Brian Hartline said last week, if I can't trust you on special teams, I can't trust you on offense or defense. And that's the way the entire coaching staff feels. And that's, we've heard that, literally forever from every single coach. Now, Tom, when you asked, how does Michigan measure or determine their quarterback? I believe the first is height. Mm. That's the Michigan way. You go with the tallest guy. And then I think the other would be just a jugs gun, the speedometer, like, oh, this dude throws 97. So, put him in.
In Lloyd Carr era, it was inverse order of shuttle times. Like, oh, John Navarre just lost a race to a literal statue. Like, oh, starter, boom.
And 0.28, he's a Hall of Famer. So yeah, that's that. Anything else, just scrolling through here, that we want to touch on before we go? I thought it was interesting. Josh Meyer was just talking about the number of blitzes that Indiana would bring, and they saw blitzes from Indiana that Indiana hadn't shown this year, and they get that every year. And He did say, like, I do like that aspect of it, being he likes the mental and the physical aspect of playing center. And it's like, well, you better, because you're the one that's going to handle all of it with all of these interior blitzes. And, like I said, he graded out a champion. Ohio State gave up 5 sacks. Tom Allen said they left about 8 other sacks on the field. And so, that's all stuff that Ohio State is seeing and grading, and yet the offensive linemen were deemed, they did their jobs, and it was up to the other guys, including Justin Fields, to do his, and that's why you didn't see Justin Fields grade out a champion. I don't think either of the running backs with their pass blocking graded out a champion, even as Master Teague ran for the yards that he did, as I'm looking here, but yeah, I don't have it up anymore. But anything else, Tom, that you wanted to touch on before we call it a day?
I think we're good with things now. We'll have another show coming up tomorrow, so Wednesday. We know you have a week when it's a little bit out of your normal routine, and you're probably not commuting to the office. If you are one of the people who still is doing that, you are probably not commuting to the office on Thursday, and maybe not even Friday this week. So we're going to give you your normal allotment of shows, but we're going to do it a little earlier in the week. So we'll have another one. This one will be up Tuesday evening, and then we'll have another one for you Wednesday morning. And the Wednesday morning one is going to kind of preview the weekend's games. We will also have Tuesday night is the college football playoff first rankings release, which speaking of stupid online anger, let's just keep those middle fingers in the holsters tonight, partners. Let's settle down. It'll be fine. No matter where Ohio State is, it will be fine.
No, right now, if they wrong us, we're going to wrong them back. Tom, I don't care what I said earlier about being kind on social media. These guys are going to have to burn.
Yes, big, dumb, stupid anger online on the college football media or college football rankings release every week is like, of all the things you could waste energy on, that might be the biggest waste of energy. If Ohio State wins out, they're fine. Okay? Promise, they'll be fine. Okay? If Ohio State is the only unbeaten team this year, Ohio State will be the number 1 seed in the college football playoff rankings. Like if Florida beats Alabama and Clemson beats Notre Dame and Ohio State wins out, unless Florida beats Alabama by 1,000,000 points or Clemson beats Notre Dame by 1,000,000 points, there's a very, 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 very good chance Ohio State is the number 1 team. Very good chance. Now, if they have a close loss, a close win against Northwestern, hey, wait a minute. Hey, someone just mentioned that earlier. Wait a minute. Style points might end up mattering. But if Ohio State's unbeaten, they're making the college football playoff. There's a decent chance they win the number 1 seed, and they get to play the number 4 team, which is probably who you want to play, because they would probably like to play Florida. Now, I don't know if Florida's going to end up being, I think it's difficult for Florida to end up as the number 4 seed unless they play a very, very close game against Alabama. You're kind of threading the needle there. But, if you can avoid Alabama and Clemson in the first round of the playoff, you should do that. So that's, we'll see how all this goes. But if history has taught us anything, don't get stressed out about the college football playoff rankings, especially the first one, because it's all going to change, and nothing they say tonight has any bearing on what they're going to say next week. There's no through line on logic on any of it.
But Tom, Heather Dinich, she said,
"Let me stop you right there." No, go on. It's fine.
No, I wanted you to stop me right there. That was perfect.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm with you because I had nothing else to say after that. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. It's been a good hour. It's been an hour.
That seems long. That's a lot of football talk. And hey, we're going to do some more football talk next. So,
well, to be fair, the first 15 minutes I don't believe was any football talk.
So you got more. You get about a normal show length, and plus so much of our individual personalities. Which, let's be honest, that's all everyone's here for, right? That's what the reviews always say.
Yes, I'll be honest. That's not why I am here. Personally, I do not care for your personality. I find it off-putting and rather brackish. People are, what does brackish mean? And then
that's me. A mix of salt and fresh water. Yes. Not sure you know what brackish means.
I know it was the first word that came into my mind. That's all right. let's just go before other words come into my mind that I shouldn't use. So thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you tomorrow.